Mark Hunt has been in the news. Last week, it was announced that he filed a lawsuit against Zuffa, Dana White, and Brock Lesnar. He has been on this show twice. Post UFC 200, you know the story by now. Upset after finding out that Brock Lesnar failed 2 drug tests, 1 out of competition, 1 in competition. The out of competition test results came back after UFC 200, asked for Brock Lesnar's entire purse, asked for a clause put in his contract that he would get the entire purse of his opponent if they failed their next drug test, if they're booked against him and failed the drug test. That did not appear to happen. Was offered multiple fights, had to turn them down out of his own principles. Eventually, he accepted a fight against Alistair Overeem at UFC 209, March 4th in Las Vegas. That was not that long ago. And then I believe Tuesday evening, it was announced that he had filed this lawsuit against, as I said, Zuffa, Dana White, and Brock Lesnar. It is an involved case. It is a very interesting case. It's an unprecedented case. It's it's a lot more complex than someone like myself can break down for all of you. So I wanted to have not only Mark, but his lawyer, Christina Denning, on the program to explain it to us, break it down for us, and really explain what it all means and where they go from here. So we're now being joined by Mark Hunt, who is in Australia, and Christina Denning, who's in the United States. First off, Mark, are you there?
Yeah, I'm just put this on my casting.
No problem.
Yeah, I'm here.
Christina, are you there?
Exactly.
I am.
Sure.
Great. Well, it is a great pleasure to have you both on. I appreciate the time. And Mark, as always, appreciate you coming on early morning in Australia. Mark, let me start with you. How long ago did you reach out to Christina to file this lawsuit?
I reached out to my manager, Mike, when this incident happened about this a while ago. After the results, I'm not really salty. I've been lost, but I lost fairly. It didn't smell right, so yeah, I reached out to Mike, and Mike reached out to Christina.
Christina, when you were approached about taking on this case, did you know anything about either A, the current state of mixed martial arts and its contracts, and B, specifically the Mark Hunt situation?
I did not, in all honesty. One of the things about me is I tend to take on the underdog in high-profile cases, but I'm new to the UFC contracts. The first thing I did was review the applicable contracts before moving forward with the case, and obviously me pairing up with Mark's manager, Mike, has really been helpful because that's provided me, I'm just a dumb litigator. It's provided me with the background that I need in order to present a case.
How long into your research, into your sort of background checking, did you recognize that A, there was a big issue here and this is something that was worth your while? Was it apparent right from the start, or did it involve some digging?
It basically involved a number of conference calls with my client just to get up to speed with sort of the pattern of behavior. The first thing that I did in terms of, doing my research is I prepared and sent a number of requests for documents pursuant to Public Records Act requests. And the responses that I got from the various entities, it was useful because, if you've read the complaint, there are some very specific allegations regarding a pattern of conduct. And, that's the whole thing about a racketeering and a fraud claim. You just can't generally allege those causes of action. You really have to have specifics down to dates, times, people that were involved. And so it's really been a process over the past couple of months putting this together. I have I have been in communication with the UFC, hoping to resolve this short of having to file the lawsuit. But ultimately, here we are.
Yeah, and of course that didn't happen. You filed the lawsuit last week. Again, for the layman, can you tell us what the charges are?
Well, there's a number of causes of action. The most important ones are the racketeering claim and the fraud and conspiracy to commit fraud claims. There are some equitable claims like unjust enrichment thrown in there, which is basically a cause of action that says, hey, this isn't fair, and some breach of contract. But really the key claims are for the racketeering and for the fraud. And it really all centers around two things. One, the thing that's really troubling is the 4-month exemption that was granted to Brock Lesnar. And when you combine that with the history of doping in the UFC, you get where we need to go, which is a pattern of conduct that the UFC and others have engaged in for the main purpose of financial gain. And that's as close to layman's terms as I can get for racketeering. You really have to have a pattern of criminal conduct that is done for the sole purpose of profiting.
Mark, you have said that you have turned down multiple fights because they wouldn't put this clause that you were asking for in the contract stating that you would get your opponent's purse if they failed a drug test. But eventually you did sign the bout agreement to fight Alistair Overeem. Why did you do that?
Well, there was the last thing they said to me was, if you don't take this fight, it'll go against your contract. So they put me in a position. Like, well, what am I supposed to do? I mean, you guys, they forced this fight on me, pretty much.
So you would have continued to hold out if they didn't say that?
Well, that was the last words that was typed in the letter that was sent to me, So to be honest, I mean, like, I reached out to Alistair, I reached out to the UFC about putting in a clause to help with this, because it's not been one, it's been 3 fighters in a row, and if I had taken the fight at Melbourne against Barnett, it would have been 4 fighters in a row. It's just ridiculous. The pattern just continues, and, I reached out to the UFC, like I said, and then to Alistair, and there was no reply. So what am I supposed to do? Then they say, oh, well, you better take this fight or else. Well, or else what?
Right. Did you ask that?
Well, and let me just jump in
sure.
here.
Because that would have pissed me off.
Go ahead, Christina.
From the outset, I flew out to Vegas, and it must have been around September, to try to accomplish 2 things: to make the Brock Lesnar situation with UFC 200, that situation right, and to also talk about a provision in contracts moving forward that really would help deter doping in this already really dangerous sport. So lines of communication were open throughout that process, including during the times when Mark was offered the other fight. With respect to the Overeem fight, it's something that the UFC put in writing that if he wasn't going to take this fight, that he would be considered to be in breach of his agreement. So, at this point, we had already made efforts to get a provision in the contract, which I think needs to be there, and we'd already tried to come up with some sort of a resolution for UFC 200, but unfortunately we weren't able to do so, and he took the fight.
And I'm sure you've looked at the contract. Are they legally within their rights to enforce any action on Mark if he would have turned down this Alistair Overeem fight on March 4th?
Well, and I'm sure that they have lawyers that would say, the answer to that is yes. And in response to that, I would say, well, there are all sorts of different defenses that we would have to that claim. But, Mark, it's also important to keep in mind that he's turned down a couple $1 million worth of fights. I'm holding out for what what he's believing in and what this lawsuit is all about. So those 2 factors, he's turned down the money, and then he gets called out on, a possible breach of his contract, and what's he supposed to do? And he wants to fight.
How much money are you seeking from the UFC?
Well, there's no real amount that you can put on it in terms of the lawsuit. You know, when you are suing a smaller, more not profitable entity, or when you're suing somebody that doesn't make that much money, then the punitive damages that you would be entitled to would be based on the net worth. And, you know, here our damages include a number of different things, but punitive damages is one of them. So there really isn't an amount that we can put on it.
Okay. And are you hoping, like, so there was a hypothesis thrown out there that signed the bout agreement, come out with the lawsuit, and now they can't do anything as far as taking the fight away from Mark. Are you hoping that remains the case? Like, have they shown any intention of now taking this fight? Because it's unprecedented to have a lawsuit against the UFC and then continue to fight for them and remain on the card. Do you have any idea if they're going to try to do that?
Well, I haven't heard from them.
Okay.
So I have no, you know, as far as I'm concerned, the fight's moving forward. I haven't heard anything otherwise. While it is an unprecedented thing here, you know, when we're talking about the UFC, it really isn't much different than any other sort of, you know, employment or contractual relationship that two parties might have where, you know, there's nothing keeping Mark from continuing to fight under this contract. I mean, the claims that he has against his, you know, the UFC, a party to a contract that he's into, they don't have anything to do with his ability to actually fight. So, you know, while it might seem uncomfortable or unprecedented, I mean, think of a situation where you've got a sexual harassment claim by someone, and the woman or the man or whoever is still continuing to perform under their contract while pursuing, you know, their claim separately.
Mm-hmm. Mark, is this uncomfortable for you in the sense that you're going to have to go out to Las Vegas to fight on this card, and this is probably still going to be pending? Does this make you feel uneasy at all?
No, it doesn't make me feel uneasy at all. I didn't put myself in the situation.
Right.
They did.
Uh-huh.
I don't really, but I don't feel, I'm not uncomfortable at all. I mean, shucks, if you want me to work, I'll go and work. But, you know, if I can't get the fair circumstance that I'm asking for, well, then this is how it's got to be. You know, you have to help me out with what I'm asking, which is pretty fair. I'm not asking, you know, I'm asking for an even playing field is all I'm asking.
Did they?
You know, you've done wrong already, so you need to pay for that.
Did they ever give you...
You've done wrong already. That needs to be sorted. And all I'm asking is an even playing field moving forward, you know, from this onwards. And that still didn't get looked at. So, you know, it's not uncomfortable for me. I mean, I'm a fighter, for God's sake. I mean, I get beaten up for a living. Yeah,
that's true. You're right. You're 100% right. Did they ever give you a specific reason why they wouldn't put this clause in?
And let me take that one, if you don't mind.
I have no idea.
Go ahead.
Well, it is true. It's an interesting dynamic. So the UFC anti-doping policy, it allows for the UFC to actually punish Brock Lesnar by actually taking his entire purse back from him, plus all of the pay-per-view proceeds. It's right there in the policy, and they could have exercised that option. What's interesting is before Brock Lesnar did have his due process to go through, because we didn't know if he was going to challenge the findings of the doping violations, right?
Yeah.
So while that process was pending, you know, the UFC brought up a point, which was the Nevada Athletic Commission, pursuant to the statutes in Nevada, they have the ability to also impose penalties on Brock. And so the UFC says, well, hey, you know, he hasn't even been found to have, you know, we don't know if he's going to challenge this, if he's going to fight it, and if he's going to win. So how are we supposed to impose the penalties that our own policy has when they're in conflict with the regulations? So I said, okay, flew back home, San Diego. We waited. There was a continuance or two of the Lesnar hearing.
Yep.
And then it comes out with the stipulation. Well, the stipulation didn't admit to intent on the part of Brock, but it didn't dispute the presence of those substances in his system, which are in violation of the anti-doping regulations. So then we said, okay, UFC, he's, the Nevada Athletic Commission has imposed a $250,000 fine. That's, and a suspension. Why don't you exercise your ability to take back the difference between the purse and between the fine amount, plus his pay-per-view proceeds, which it says right here that you can do, but they wouldn't do it. And so we've gone through an evolving, negotiation with the UFC. It's not based on, there's nothing in, and I want to be clear about this, there's nothing in Mark's contract with respect to UFC 200 that says if Brock's found to be cheating, then these are going to be the penalties. And I don't want to suggest to anyone out there that is in the contract, because we acknowledge that it is not. But what we're saying is, hey, you have all these avenues out there in terms of cracking down on the use of banned substances, and the Nevada Athletic Commission has its list of penalties that it can give, and the UFC has its list of penalties that it can give, but neither one of them is doing, the maximum amount of punishment. So, what incentive does Brock, who's coming from a one-off, who, admits that he was in negotiations for 3 months before June of last year, which would put us at 4 months before the actual fight, what's to prevent him from just sitting on his hands, not signing a bout agreement, getting all the drugs out of his system, and then testing clean on the first few tests, right? And then when he gets right up close to there, he knows what his big payday is going to be, and he can see what the precedent is for the fines and penalties that are imposed on him. And so that's the basis of what our requests and demands have been. And it's really, something that Mark is owed, in my opinion, based on the conduct of the UFC and Brock Lesnar leading up to this fight.
And did the UFC, Christina, give you any specific reason why they would not punish Brock the way you're suggesting they should have?
The only thing that I've heard is we've honored our commitments to Mr. Lesnar. And that was in response to my question shortly after UFC 200. When I say shortly after, I mean probably in September, which was, hey, did you guys pay him? And that was the answer. Has Brock Lesnar been paid? The answer was, we've honored our commitments to Mr. Lesnar. I don't know what that means, but that's the only response I've gotten.
Mark, you always said that you wanted to wait and see what the Nevada Athletic Commission did. What was your reaction to the punishment they gave Brock Lesnar?
Well, I mean, pretty much it's a slap on the wrist. It's not even a punishment, to be honest. I mean, he took the money that he made that night and paid that fine. I mean, like I said, if I had died that night, would that punishment be the same?
Yeah.
People say you didn't die, but if someone had further up down the field, if someone dies and they give up those penalties, do you think people will understand that that's a harsh enough penalties? No, it isn't. I think we need to punish these cheaters in the pocket to start with, and that'll make all these other a deterrent for all these other cheaters to come along and say, well, we don't get no money for it. Well, then why do it? To be honest, I don't think it's harsh enough at all, no.
And so right now you're going to continue to fight for the UFC, but is it fair to say that in a perfect world, like the best case scenario would be that they let you go so that you don't have to deal with these rules anymore? Is on top of the monetary, damages that you're seeking, would you like to be released?
Well, that was on them, though. I'm under contract with them, and they're under contract with me.
Yeah.
Okay. That I couldn't go anywhere else. So I mean, that's the position right now. It is. So if I couldn't work anywhere else, and I'm still trying to get my fair deal in this thing, well, what am I supposed to do? If they're going to let me go. At least I can go work somewhere else. My family, I've got to look after my family and my commitments as well. And you just can't sit me at the back of the bus without having any work. You just can't do that.
And of course,
regardless of whether you're trying to do that. So,
Alistair Overeem has a history with PEDs. Were you hesitant to take this particular fight? You could have taken another fight with a guy who doesn't, like, why Overeem?
Well, It's not. I don't make these choices.
Yeah.
You know, I don't ask to fight anybody. All I ask is to fight the best fighters in the world. All I'm doing was when they say, "Do you fight this person?" I say, yes, because I'm employed with them. So when they say, "Oh, would you fight this guy?" Of course I'd fight. I'd fight anybody in the world. You know, all I was asking for was an even playing field. I tried to put a clause in. I reached out to Alistair, and you know, all the doors were closed. So you know, this is why we're here now.
Sure.
Because of this situation. You want to close the doors on me? We're here now. So what are we going to do?
And Mark, what do you say?
So like I said, I didn't ask to fight anyone. They just say, "Would you fight this person?" And I say, "Yes."
Yeah.
I can't pick and choose who I fight. Otherwise, everyone will pick the easiest fighter they can and then go and fight and be the world's best.
What do you say to the people who point to the interview that you did beforehand when you said that Brock was juiced to the gills? That, you know, you knew the situation, you knew the playing field, you knew what to expect. What do you say to them?
Knowing, and people say that knowing and assuming are two different things. I mean, I assume a lot of stuff. I mean, looking at the guy, he comes from a pro wrestling background. I didn't actually know these things. I'm always going to say, well, he looks like he's cheating. Of course I'm going to say it because that's the way I am. I say things that I see it how I say it. So, I mean, I'm not going to just say, I mean, I didn't actually go and test him myself. But, I mean, everyone says, oh, you knew. Well, I didn't actually know. Assuming someone is doping is different from knowing. That's the difference here. I mean, I didn't know. I mean, I assume everybody's on an even playing field up at the top end until they get caught up enough. And then it ruins everything, okay? Unless I actually test them myself, then I wouldn't know.
And that's one of the allegations in our complaint is that, you know, the UFC has a non-delegable duty here. This isn't, you know, especially considering that they granted the exemption. They could have paid a nominal fee to expedite the results. They could have done something to make sure that this guy wasn't juiced to the gills. And they didn't. That's not Mark's responsibility. And again, having admitted that I'm not an expert in the UFC and the history and of the sport, I'd imagine that there's a certain level of talking smack that goes on before the fights, right? I mean, that's part of the whole. Yeah. That's part of the whole thing. Is being able to say, "Hey, I'm going to kick your ass" to your opponent. And so I don't know, and especially since, you know, Mark wasn't involved in the legal side of it, he didn't, you know, have the task of breaking this pattern of behavior down beforehand. He didn't conduct all the research and do the Public Records Act request and find the pattern before he fought and then knowingly go into it. I mean, and if, you know, I've been monitoring the comments and the feedback from people out there that are reading the articles, and that's the number one thing that they're quick to point out. But that doesn't take away from the UFC's obligation to ensure an even playing field in the sport and fair competition.
In your complaint, you cite the UFC 152 situation with Vitor Belfort. Do you believe, Christina, that the UFC has a history of covering up PD usage before fights?
Well, that's exactly what our complaint alleges.
Okay. Do you have?
And in that 152 fight, I don't know if you read in the complaint, but the email that went out.
Yep.
So you've got a fight that's happening, and some people are privy to the information that the other person is, you know, has 2.5 times the allowed or the normal amount of steroids in their system. But you know, what do? They throw them in the ring with somebody. So without that person knowing.
So again, for the layman, what are the next steps now? You file the lawsuit. Now what happens?
Well, as of Friday, when I checked on it, it was out for service.
Okay.
Which means that'll trigger the deadline for the defendants to respond, which will be within the next 30 days.
Okay.
they may, each defendant will have that certain allotted amount of time, so it'll depend on who gets served first. I imagine Brock might be a little bit more difficult to find. And then we're going to wait for them to file a responsive pleading, which will likely be in the form of a motion to attack our complaint and have some of the causes of action thrown out, but we're ready for that.
How long does it take for something like this to resolve? I know they're all different, but like, are we looking at multiple years or could it be shorter?
And I haven't been tracking that particular district court. I do have some cases in Southern California District Court, and your average time frame's probably 1.5 to 2 years from start to finish.
Okay.
But it could be quicker or it could be longer, and especially considering the nature of the case and the defendants. There can be motions filed, and this could drag on for a while. But we have a team assembled and the resources to do what we can to push it along.
Mark, how many fights do you have left on your contract?
I have, I think about 5 fights. I don't know. I mean, they've offered me 2. I said no, so about 5.
Okay. And, obviously you're taking on some heavy hitters here. Like, financially, is this a problem for you to be involved in something like this?
Well, of course, it's always a problem, but it's what's right. You know what I mean? This is not so. If I say no to this, people say it's about money. Well, it's about grabbing the cheaters' money. It's about taking the cheating out of the sport and make it even. It's about an even playing field for me at the end of the day. And I didn't sign the contract regardless of how you dress it up. Cheating is cheating. And I signed a contract to fight someone that's not doping, to be honest. All the guys aren't doping, and regardless, they're heavy hitters because people put it. I mean, every celebrity, entertainer, every company is put there by people, normal people. They don't get to their position without being people going following them. Okay, without the people, there's no companies.
Yeah,
you got to remember that.
Do you feel comfortable with the idea of this being your legacy, Mark? I mean, if you win this is again unprecedented. It's seismic. Does that, do you think about that sort of thing? This is my way of changing the sport. Your story is such a unique one with how you came into the UFC and all that stuff. But this will change everything.
Well, to be honest, like I said, I didn't even want to be a fighter. If you read my book, you'll understand me totally. This is, like I said, I didn't want to be a fighter. I'm here now. I've fought for many, many years now, 27 years or something. I'm probably 15 or something at the top end of 2 different sports. And this is just another fight. This is just something I thought was wrong. I've understood it. It's just become a pattern to me that's happening. One of these times, if I said no to doing this, and I'll be like, oh well, then I'm just going to go back in the octagon and just get a paycheck and be like everyone else. But no, it's not right. I know my life is at risk. All these fighters are putting the clean guys are putting their lives on the line here. These guys that are cheating they're assaulting. Or I think it's assault and battery on the guys that are cheating, because the contract we signed, that they signed, is not to allow themselves to enhance themselves. So, that's actually a criminal offence, I feel. And I think until someone dies is when people are going to realise that. Someone's going, but if someone's going to die, they're going to go, well, that guy was cheating, and what are we going to do about it? Well, give him a year fine and $250,000. Well, what about his? It's ridiculous.
And Mark,
the pattern's been continuing,
sure, and
I'm over it. So the pattern's happened to me so many times. I take a loss like a man all the time, but when this sort of stuff happens, it just keeps continuing. Then I gotta say something. I'm not gonna go to the back of the bus and sit down. Hell no. You get to the fucking back of the bus.
Have you heard from other fighters, Mark, since you filed this lawsuit in support of you?
Well, I can't really. I'm comment on other fighters. Is what other fighters doing is what other fighters are doing. They have their own reasons why they don't stand up and say something. At the end of the day, we're employees, but even though the company says we're not employees, without us, they're nothing. Mm-hmm. People forget that. Without the fighters, without the people, these companies won't be nothing.
I have 2 last questions for you, Christina, and I really appreciate both of your time here today. Have you, given your history and being someone who's new to the sport, the state of UFC contracts is a hot topic in our sport. From your perspective, Are these problematic? I mean, on top of the PED stuff, based on your research, your knowledge, your experience, do you agree with those who say that the contracts are, not really in favor of the fighters?
Okay, so I am, my history is as a litigator. I'm not a sports manager. I'm not Mark's manager. I'm not his agent. And I don't negotiate those contracts. However, with that said, one thing that I find troubling, at least with respect to this issue, is the fact that the UFC anti-doping policy, it models itself off of the world anti-doping policy, which and it states it right in the contract, and it states that one of the goals is to have the best doping program in the world and to ensure a level playing field. So in this instance, the World Doping Program actually has a provision in it which is similar to the one that we're asking for, that Mark's asking for, with respect to, taking the money and the winnings back from the person that's found to have been doping and give it to the non-cheating competitor. Mm-hmm. And so where I see a problem with respect to just this lawsuit only, and I can't speak intelligently about the state of affairs for employment as to all UFC fighters, or the state of the contracts if they're independent contractors. But I can say that I think it's problematic that a policy that models itself off of the World Anti-Doping Program doesn't, in fact, do so. And I also think that it's troubling that it appears to, at least with respect to the Nevada Athletic Commission and its jurisdiction over imposing penalties, it seems like there's a couple of things that could be ironed out with respect to having the doping program actually coordinate in a better way with the NAC's jurisdiction than it currently does.
And this might be a tough question for you to answer, but I'll ask anyways. Do you expect them to try and settle beforehand, or are you expecting them to try to fight you in court? Can you even, guess as to what direction this will go in?
I can't, but I'm buckling down, for a fight.
Okay.
So my phone hasn't rang, and I'm not sitting around waiting for it to ring. Okay.
Wow. Fascinating stuff. Anything else that I didn't ask you, just in the interest of, me not knowing, not being a lawyer? Is there any other element to this that you would like to address or clear up while we have this platform?
No, I think you've done a great job of covering, a lot of what people are wondering about.
Okay. Well, I can't thank you enough. I wish you the best. And Mark, appreciate the time as always. Good luck training for the fight, and hope to see you out there in Las Vegas. Best of luck to both of you.
Thank you.
Okay, guys. Thanks, man. See you guys. Take care. Bye.
All right. There he is, Mark Hunt, and his lawyer, Christina Denning. Fascinating stuff. Fascinating times. Wow. An active UFC fighter, a fairly popular one, a contender, if you will, involved in a lawsuit with not only Zuffa, Dana White, and Brock Lesnar. I did reach out to the UFC late last week to get any kind of comment from them on this, but they declined to comment at this time, which I expected, but wanted to give them the opportunity to say anything if they wanted to. And I'm curious to see, do they try to settle? Do they try to fight? Wow. And of course, there's the Brock Lesnar element to all of this. Really, really fascinating stuff. And say this about Mark Hunt. He is a man of his word. He said if that Nevada Athletic Commission punishment was what he expected it to be, and if they did not put in that clause, that he would seek legal damages. And he has done just that. And you wonder, one guy, one fighter against three behemoths, how long can he sustain that? But kudos to him for at least saying, or I should say doing what he said he was going to do, sticking true to his word. For whatever it's worth, I think that's honorable. So we wish him the best, and hopefully they can find some kind of resolution where everyone is happy and able to move on, and he can resume his career.